Dungavel, and I'm joined today by my colleague Julie Beckett. We are CLD, Community Learning Development Officers in Education Scotland, and part of the National Communities and Families team in Education Scotland. Just some initial kind of protocols and steps just to kind of highlight with everybody. Please keep microphones off. Currently we have them disabled due to the kind of quantity of people that are coming here today, but you'll have the opportunity at the end to ask any questions. All our slides and links will be shared at the end as well. The event is being recorded, so we can share it with practitioners that aren't able to attend today. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat box directly. We'll attempt to answer as many of these towards the end of the event and the launch event today, and follow up with a written response to any we don't manage to cover. The input today will consist of information on the toolkit, information from stakeholders that have used its pilot versions, and also a live demonstration. And our stakeholders today include Stirling Youth Participation Team, Clackmannanshire Council, and Harry's Muir Primary School in West Lothian. Just to highlight that when it comes to Education Scotland, that we recognise the principles for professional learning in our events, and to ensure all the spaces we reflect and learn within reflect these principles. So just to kind of acknowledge these are the kind of things we're hoping to achieve today. Now, I'd like to pass you to our Strategic Director, David Gregory, who is the Strategic Director for Lifelong Learning and the Director in Education Scotland, who will give some opening remarks before the launch today. Just pass to yourself, Dave, if that's all right.
Thank you very much indeed, Jamie. And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the introduction to the Education Scotland Youth Voice Toolkit. Before I say anything else, I've been told to be brief, and I will be, but I would really like to thank Julie and Jamie for their outstanding work on this. And as you will see, they've developed a usable, practical, and extremely helpful toolkit for everyone in classrooms, settings, and communities across the country. And I'd like to think that we could start to use this as something that's a Scottish way of doing pupil voice. Why have we developed the toolkit? Well, it's not just about the UNCRC. It's also about it's about the simple importance of children, young people, and learners having a say in their lives. Having a say is important, and it's an undeniable right. And the toolkit provides a consistent and effective way of providing this. We'll be using in Education Scotland. Jamie and Julie have already shared this with colleagues within Education Scotland, and we're encouraging them to use it as they go about their daily business with young people and learners across Scotland. As I've said, the toolkit is for use in all classrooms, all settings, and all communities. And I'm making a plea to you, which is really why I'm here. If you're using it, please share your journey with us. There's an email address in the pack, and there's an impact form in the pack. And if you can share that back to us, we can make changes, we can amend, we can make suggestions, but more importantly, we can understand your journey and learners' journey throughout Scotland, which would be a really fantastic thing. I know you'll enjoy the session. I've already seen some of it previously, and I hope your voice journey is a fruitful one. Thank you very much for attending this afternoon, and I'll hand over to Julie.
Thank you very much, Dave. Great to see everyone here today. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to start with two quotes today that really underpin everything that we're here to talk about. The first one is a quote from Together Scotland from the 2023 Annual State of Children's Rights Report. And this highlighted that at this point in time, unfortunately, current methods for youth voice are causing frustration for a lot of children and young people. The key issues that they identified as part of this report is around tokenistic approaches to youth voice, lack of a feedback loop, seldom heard groups being excluded from participation, and participation sometimes feeling forced or pressured rather than voluntary. And most importantly, the report highlights a quote as part of that states that only 5% of children feel like they get heard, and obviously that needs to be more. The second quote that I wanted to highlight today at the start of this session is a quote from Antonio Guterres from the UN. And he reinforces the importance of working in a genuine way with children and young people. His message to every young person is that their voice, leadership and ideas matter. So let's work together to support youth-led solutions to build a more just, peaceful and sustainable world from the ground up. And I thought that was a really powerful quote to set the scene for our session today. This Youth Voice Toolkit offers just one example of a youth-led solution that can help us support children and young people to be heard and lead change. So with this in mind at the outset, we wanted to cover the foundational elements and the real building blocks of the Youth Voice Toolkit that we are launching today. This work is grounded within the 7 golden rules of participation that are outlined by the Children's Parliament, and these are designed to help children and young people and help them be involved in decision making as a rights-based framework. You'll see there we've got the UNCRC Article 12 in the middle there, alongside the Lundy Model of Participation, which is a rights-based framework for engaging children and young people in decision making and encourages us to think about the space, the voice, the audience and the influence as conditions that all need to be present to uphold rights-based participation with children and young people. And in considering the foundations of this work, we want to give a really special acknowledgement as to where it's come from. This resource has been developed from the original Social Justice Ambassadors Toolkit, which was created by the Stirling Youth Participation Team over a number of years. It was co-designed over time with young people who were previously involved with the Stirling Youth Forum, and they had a real vision and a drive for making sure that children and young people could have opportunities to be confident, expressing their voice and being heard and listened to by adults around them. Crucially to the success in Stirling was a whole council approach from the top down throughout the council and a real commitment to listening to children and young people, and it was really led by those young people and the youth participation team, so we owe them great thanks for where we've got to in terms of development today. The original toolkit then shaped a successful Social Justice Ambassadors programme that was rolled out in Stirling, and this resource builds on those original core concepts of peer research, empowerment and skills development. So today we offer a huge thank you to the Stirling Youth Participation team and young people for their guidance, support and challenge throughout this process. Following its inception in Stirling, Jamie and I both worked regionally in Forth Valley and West Lothian with the Forth Valley and West Lothian Regional Youth Voice Development Group to upscale the model, recognising that it works best when it's connected up bigger than just within an individual school or setting. So the development of the Youth Voice Toolkit to get to where it is today has been a journey of learning over a number of years, with lots of sense checking with young people and practitioners, pushback, testing, piloting, and we're really thankful for everyone's involvement in this, and the inputs in the session later today will hopefully bring the journey to life. So, what is the Youth Voice Toolkit? It's what everyone's here to find out more about. The Youth Voice Toolkit helps make rights real with a genuine approach to youth voice and consultation activities across schools and communities. The toolkit outlines how to create a charter of principles to support effective youth participation and includes a downloadable Empowering Youth Voice resource to support children and young people to undertake peer research on any theme. The toolkit empowers children and young people to share their views on issues that affect their lives across both school and community settings. It provides guidance, resources and information and is very much based on practitioner judgment, so it can be tailored to fit across a range of school and community settings. As you'll have noticed from our work in Forth Valley and West Lothian, it can also be used to develop a broader approach to youth voice across larger organisations and local authorities. Before Jamie takes us through a live demonstration, the Youth Voice Toolkit is made up of the 3 parts you see on your screen. First is the implementation guidance for schools, community settings and local authorities, and this sets out the importance of agreeing leadership support, then creating a Youth Voice Charter, utilising the Empowering Youth Voice resource pack and taking action. The second part of the toolkit you'll see in the middle here is the Empowering Youth Voices resource pack, which is a downloadable PowerPoint resource to support the peer research process. And thirdly, we have a section for supporting materials, including an additional presentation for sharing with staff, as long with frequently asked questions, a quick start guide and additional reading and resources. And just a quick note here to also highlight that we have a Gaelic translated version of the toolkit that will be appearing on the website shortly as well. Jamie, I'll hand over to you for the demo.
Thanks very much, Julie. So the toolkit, as mentioned, has 3 parts to it. I'm now going to explore this in more detail. The strength of this toolkit is in the process behind the resource, and a lot of work's been put into making this work in a wide range of settings as possible. We encourage practitioners who attend here today to explore the toolkit fully, read its contents, and this is the best way to implement it successfully. However, we will be providing specific professional learning on more detailed demonstrations of how the toolkit can be utilised in specific scenarios in September, and dates will follow to this at the end. We're now going to show you where the toolkit lives, how to navigate through its main parts, and the purpose of each of these. So I'm just going to bring up our main site. So hopefully everybody can see that. So in Education Scotland, this is our main landing page. And to find the Youth Voice Toolkit, it's very simple. If you go to Practitioner Resources and go to Children's Rights in Scotland, you're directed to this main page, which gives all information from ourselves as the national organisation about UNCRC and how it can support elements of that within Scotland. As you scroll down, the third kind of paragraph here talks about the Youth Voice Toolkit and provides a link to get you there. Now, as you click this link, it brings up the main landing page for the toolkit with a description of the key elements, such as the implementation guide, the Empowering Youth Voices resource pack, and the support materials. Also, some of the key elements in regards to how this toolkit works, as Julie's already explained, and see some of the kind of practical steps that are involved within it. I'm just going to take you through each of these elements just now and hopefully give you a little flavour of each of them so you can understand each of the parts in more detail. In our implementation guidance, it talks about terms and it talks about how to do it in a specific setting. So we use the terms such as youth voice, because that covers anybody up to the age of 25. And we also use quite consistently the idea of youth voice structures. So when we say a youth voice structure, it is essentially a group of children and young people that are come together to basically advocate for their peers or represent their peers. This can be done in shapes of like pupil councils, it can be done in the shape from youth forums, it can be done in the shapes of like youth groups or classes. It just depends on the different settings that exist. There's a little bit of guidance here about what youth voice activities mean, and again, some of the references to why it's so important. On the right-hand side here, we've got the main contents of how to implement it in different settings. So we've got in a school, in a community setting, in a local authority, or in a large voluntary organisation. One of the things we always highlight with this toolkit is if you are a small voluntary organisation, the implementation in a community is probably better fitted. Just going into the first one there, implementation in a school, you'll notice at the top of each of these stages is a impact form that we encourage essentially anybody that is using the toolkit to complete to let us know that they're going through that journey. We hope that this page and this elements of the Youth Voice Toolkit starts to capture a real rich repository of information in regards to what Youth Voice is saying from across the country around about different themes. But we only know that if you get in touch with us. Really simple form to complete, only takes about 2 minutes. And we've also got an email address, which will be was at the start, which is youthvoice@educationscotland.gov.uk, and ultimately that's the best way to get in touch with ourselves. Looking at the key steps, we are looking at the things around about leadership support, creating a Youth Voice charter, utilising the new Empowering Youth Voices resource pack, and taking action. Each of these steps is broken down into kind of digestible chunks. So for example, going into leadership support, it kind of reinforces the importance of having leadership buy-in, be that having your head teacher in a school agree to the approach, or a local authority leader, or someone that's maybe a kind of manager or chief executive or council leader. These are the sort of people that need to have buy-in to this approach to make it successful in different settings. One of the kind of main parts of this is we provide resources that support implementation, and these are all contained in our support materials section. So there's specifically a summary presentation there that you can use with leaders, and I'll come on to that when we go into that specific section. Other elements here, and one of the most important parts, is about creating a Youth Voice charter. Now, we've created the specific details of how to do that, the questions that you may want to ask children and young people to create a charter, and ultimately why this is so important, because essentially these are the principles for Youth Voice. And what it does is it creates consistency around about how practitioners facilitate Youth Voice. We've given sort of the kind of steps you go through, and ultimately we've also provided an example of the one that was done in Forth Valley and West Lothian, which kind of details the kind of 10 principles in that region, essentially, that children and young people said. Again, those links will be available, but there's some really powerful statements there. So that Youth Voice Charter is a really powerful approach. Each of these steps takes you through the kind of things you should follow, and following this implementation guidance allows you to essentially implement the Youth Voice Toolkit in your individual setting. We have a collective area at the end about measuring impact and sharing action, which is around about how you complete the feedback loop. So the things you should be doing with children and young people to let them know you've taken action based on consulting their views, and how you do that in a sort of meaningful way. Each of these sections goes into that in detail for their individual kind of environment. Some are a little bit more complicated, such as a local authority, which requires additional steps because of the nature of the kind of scale at which it's been done. But all the kind of steps are there. And again, we're always just an email away if anybody has a particular query. Going back to the main landing page, we then move to our main downloadable resource. And again, as you can see, this is all intertwined with one another. So if you follow the implementation guidance, you can quite clearly see that it's easy to navigate to this particular part without much difficulty. In this section, we've got a description of what the pack is. Again, contact information for completing our engagement form or our email, but then some kind of key questions like how does it work? What does it do? What else should you be aware of? Some important things like if you're using this to consult on a particular theme, how to make that particular theme understandable to children and young people. And again, there's specific resources in our support materials section. I'm just going to go into the individual parts of each of these downloads here and just show you kind of snippets of what they kind of look like, because again, I think I won't be able to go through all of it, but what you can see is the kind of main layout. Now, this is part one. We've deliberately splitted this resource into two parts to make it a bit more easy to do in chunks, but also at the same time, the first part needs to be done at the start with any youth voice structure. Again, a group, a pupil council, a youth forum, a class. But the second part, that can be done multiple times. So this part only needs to be done once, unless that youth voice structure changes significantly. So it's just to make that be a bit understandable. And again, each of these resources, we've got parts that kind of link what this resource is. We've got kind of key labels here for who it's for. So some of the slides are for practitioners to refer to before delivering this to children and young people. If I jump down a little bit here, you'll see each of these slides have contents. So these are the main contents of our downloadable youth resource. There's elements around about understanding youth voice, understanding about how to make people, children and young people become a team, and so on. I'm just going to delve into a couple of these just now, just to give a bit of a flavour. So this first section here, we talk about understanding youth voice. So we've demonstrated why youth voice is so important. And then again, we refer back to the importance of a youth voice charter. What you'll notice in this visualization is each of these slides has facilitator notes. Again, clear guidance for practitioners in any setting to deliver this resource so they know what to do, steps to take, who to involve, questions to ask. And the same is true of this one. So this first section here is all about the importance of youth voice and sets the landscape clear for children and young people why youth voice is such an important thing. Moving on slightly, we talk about UNCRC and rights. So there's a whole section here about what rights are and why this is important, and a range of different activities that come with this. So again, you'll notice at the top of each of these sort of slides, it's either mentioned as an activity or practitioner notes, etc. This is to give you, again, a bit of guidance on what's kind of happening here, and then essentially the kind of facilitator notes how to run it. This kind of wee portfolio here is all about Article 12, children's rights in different articles, and you'll see at the top in the kind of middle here, these are discussion activities. So these would be things you would prompt children and young people to discuss and have to give a bit of feedback from what they're saying, helping them understanding what children's rights are. Moving on slightly, you'll see one of the other sections about working as a team to become researchers, and that is the core crux of this resource. It's empowering children and young people to represent their peers. So again, they're not representing just themselves, but they're representing others within their individual setting. And the best way of doing that is becoming peer researchers. So the activities here can number a number of things. Some of the initial ones focus on how to become a team and what makes a good team. Discussion activities are quite hands-on, quite engaging, quite fun for children and young people. Again, to help that group that may have met only this time or may have met for the first time to understand the importance of working as a team to represent their peers. Going down a little bit further, you'll see there's kind of elements here of helping children and young people to understand what being a researcher is and the importance of research. So the things around about respect and why it's important to be respectful of other people's opinions, even if those opinions are different to your own. And again, a mixture of activities and different things that take place. As you go through the rest of this resource, it comes to conclusion, and it tells you again specifically to move on to part 2 of the resource. And this second part of the resource ultimately focuses on the idea of a particular theme that you're going to consult, or children and young people want to consult their peers on. And the contents of this are quite specific. So identifying a theme and how to use research tools, undertaking the research, and analysing the results. Really importantly, when it comes to a theme, this might be a theme that's been identified for children and young people because it's seen as a need and you're presenting that to them, or it's something you're going to help them identify. But really importantly, it's key that they understand what the theme is. And just to give you a kind of idea of that, it might be something around about mental health. It might be something around about groups and clubs. It might be about safe spaces. That theme could be anything. But with children and young people, they all are different ages and stages and understandings. So breaking that down is really quite paramount. And when we move down a little bit, we confirm the theme. There's guidance here. Does everybody understand the theme? And this link here specifically takes you to within our website for that particular resource in the support materials section about how to make a theme understandable. So again, it's all intertwined, but that is a really important element, because if children and young people don't understand what's been consulted, then it's not going to result in something that's meaningful. Moving down slightly, you can see some of the other activities that follow the same grouping. So again, research and how to ask good questions. Here's an example that's part of the tool, like the questions are about, do you think there should be a school? Describe what school is. What is your experience of school? Some questions are better than others and generate different responses. And it's about children and young people playing with this idea, about asking really good questions to generate good results. And we have a whole section in this in regards to what good questions are, the different types of questions, how to help children and young people understand that, because they will be the ones facilitating this research. Then thinking about the key questions and where they're going to ask. So again, the focus of this resource is empowering this group of children and young people, whoever they may be, to consult their peers. So are they going around the school? Are they going around youth groups in the community? Are they going around different selection of places that children and young people gather? That's something that's part of the process of conducting this sort of peer research approach. And then testing questions, do they make sense? Do they, if a sort of 10-year-old or 11-year-old has developed these questions as part of their group, do they make sense to younger children? Do they make sense to their peers? Making sure that everything makes sense to that consultation group so that it's quite understood and there's no kind of dubiety. Then it's about confirming the final questions, and then ultimately the next step is about doing the research, which is about facilitating that research in place. And this is something that's really quite enjoyable, because you're empowering children and young people to go out, ask their peers and represent their peers and gather that information. Moving on to the sort of last stages of the sort of resource, it talks about looking at the results and ultimately what's found. So gathering the information that's been brought in, really breaking it down, seeing what's been said, if there's things being said specifically about how many of something or how many views, trying to help children and young people distill this down with your support, distill it down into a meaningful narrative that makes sense. After they sort of analyse those sort of specific results, what they'll be doing next is sort of creating an action plan. So this is the kind of main strength of the Youth Voice Toolkit, that they've went through this process. There's key principles in place about how adults are going to work with them. They've done this resource, so they know how to consult their peers and the importance of youth voice. They've consulted on something that's important to them, or it's something that's important to their lives, and then they're developing an action plan. So that may be something that they want to change in a setting within their community, and might be something in regards to in their specific school setting or wider. The other steps in regards to this are about keeping people informed and presenting the research results, so presenting to leaders and decision makers. And this is all quite important, which we'll detail in a wee minute. But that brings us to the sort of end of this particular elements in the research. And really importantly, it's key to highlight that this part can be done again. So if there's a different theme, a different topic, then ultimately that's the opportunity to do so. Now, just moving back to our main page, again, what I've just went through is these two links, quite clear, to kind of download the resource. And going back to the main sort of landing page of the toolkit, we see our support materials section. Now, these support materials in their current state will grow, but these are the kind of main ones that we encourage practitioners to refer to at the meantime when they're implementing the toolkit in their setting. So like I mentioned previously, we have a summary presentation that's there specifically for practitioners to reference to if they're presenting this to any of the leaders in any of their particular settings, to help them understand why this is important. And I'm going to show you some of the graphics around about that in a wee minute or two to help you understand as well, because I think it's quite important to gain reference to why this toolkit exists. Things around about a quick start checklist. Again, having something quite visual and accessible is really handy to have. The steps that any practitioner should be achieving to make this a reality. We've also got a downloadable version of this that you can download if you prefer to print it out. And again, show it with your colleagues, show it with the children and young people themselves. A really handy kind of tool to have ultimately to demonstrate the kind of steps you need to go through to implement the toolkit. And then other kind of sections we have here is, like I referenced before, how to make a theme understandable. So breaking things down, key steps here to make it understandable. Using simple language, like one of the examples here is if we're talking about financial literacy, how do you make that understandable to children and young people? Well, we use things like it's about knowing how to spend your money wisely so you don't run out. That's quite clear. Most children and young people understand that, and you're taking away from complicated language that some might not understand. So this guidance here is specifically for that purpose. We also have guidance here about creating a youth voice practitioner network. So again, if you are connecting to other practitioners in a cluster, for example, among schools, if this has been done in a local authority, we would recommend that you have youth work practitioners who facilitate youth voice and schools who have teachers that facilitate youth voice coming together and having a network there so they can empower and implement this approach collectively and develop new ideas. And also we've got sort of some of our frequently asked questions that are really useful to see, and that sort of references back to the idea of the top things that we've encountered as part of this this process. That is the main sort of elements of the toolkit, and again, as time goes on, we hope to add layers to it as we practitioners start to use this and inform us via the form that they're using it. We will be capturing examples where it's been utilised and what data has been gathered, what children and young people are saying, the results of that, and this will start to populate this toolkit page more widely. And just to highlight, we've got additional reading and resources there in case anybody is interested in that. But those are the three main elements of the toolkit. And what we're going to do now is just kind of go into a wee bit of why this is important in the kind of more kind of broader sense. So I'm just going to go back to the slides. Okay. So when we look for the, if I just bring this down, why this is important. Sorry, it's just taking a wee second. So why this is important. So once we look at why this is important, it's key to thinking about the strength of this toolkit. Again, it's the resources, it's the things that are important that allow it to make it a reality. Just moving on, what we think about is when we look at youth voice structures, they're often facilitated by adults. And these structures are well known to practitioners who've been involved in supporting them. So although they have many different names, they often follow a similar approach. This is to have a group of children and young people who come together and act as representatives for others based on the community, school, or particular theme. Adults normally ask these youth voice structures their views and opinions on a range of different themes or topics, from school policies around the curriculum, uniform, or community groups such as things around about transport, environment, etc. These views are then utilised to inform adults what to do next. If we move on, we can see that adults sometimes also ask children and young people directly out with youth voice structures their views. Normally, these consultations don't really involve youth voice structures in their creation. The approach, the questions, the engagement method is usually facilitated and created by adults directly. So, some of this, when you think about how it applies on the ground, often appears through questions that people have that are involved. For the key staff, they often ask things like, where do I start? I'm not sure how to facilitate youth voice well. How do I make sure it's not just the same voices that are being heard over and over? Is this really what children and young people want? And these are key questions that a lot of practitioners would ask that are facilitating youth voice structures. When we think about the views of those children and young people in a youth voice structure, such as a youth forum or pupil council, they kind of think similar questions. Maybe they don't understand what they're being consulted on. Maybe they're not really sure what they're meant to be doing. They don't really know why things have not changed yet, even though they've gave their opinions. And sometimes, like we've seen previously, they can feel things are quite rushed. And then finally, those that make up the majority, all those children and young people that are not involved in a youth voice structure and don't participate in a youth voice structure, they often ask the biggest questions. Does my voice matter? No one explains what I'm being asked. What actions happened as a result of me being asked something? I have a view, who do I share this with? And these are key things that we look to sort of address ultimately in this toolkit. Findings show ultimately that when youth voice happens, it's often tokenistic, it's rushed, sometimes non-representative, lacks action, and doesn't inform. And ultimately, the toolkit sort of addresses this. So this toolkit is based on a proven method that guides adults through step-by-step implementation, guides youth voice structures through the process, can work with a current group or a new group, even if it's a full youth group or a full class, collection of individuals such as members of the Scottish Youth Parliament or young carers. It doesn't matter who it is, it works with any particular youth voice structure. And what it means is that these structures become more representatives. They're actively including the views of their peers, they're shaping the consultations and what they ask, and they're demonstrating the views of the majority instead of just the minority, and take action now to inform change and decisions. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to pass you back to Julie, who's introduced some of our guest speakers today who have utilised elements of the Youth Voice Toolkit when it existed in our regional model in Forth Valley and West Lothian. Julie?
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm going to hand this over now, firstly to Amy Donnelly from Stirling Youth Participation Team to take us through the journey with Speak Up Stirling. Thank you, Amy. Over to you.
Hi everybody, can you hear me?
Yeah, Amy, that's great.
Perfect, thank you. Sorry, it was taking a while to load. I'm Amy Donnelly. I'm part of Stirling Council's Youth Participation Team. I'm going to give you a really quick whistle-stop tour of how we've used it as a team in one of our community-based settings. So I began with our youth forum in March of 24 following maternity leave. The forum really lacked direction following some changes in staff and some new members who'd come along but had brought some friends. Most of our members at this point had little experience of consultation, and any of you hadn't really participated in Youth Voice Action, but they were really keen to come along and get involved. So it was a bit of a trial period for me to kind of work out what to do with them. After a chat with the group, we decided to go right back to basics and revisit what Youth Voice actually meant and why it was so important. I needed to introduce the forum as something that would empower them and show them the value that they hold, but also tied in with our youth work approach and our national youth work outcomes. So one of the first activities we did as a group was to review the Forth Valley and West Lothian Youth Voice Charter and what it meant to young people, and we worked through parts of the toolkit alongside this. Due to our time constraints, we didn't have time to work through the toolkit in its entirety, so the group chose activities that they felt were the most relevant to the direction that we were moving in and what we wanted to achieve. As a practitioner, I felt the toolkit was really useful. It was really, really self-explanatory. It was laid out for me basically to essentially pick it up and go. It didn't involve a lot of prep work beforehand, and the sessions were set out in a way that even one of our young volunteers was able to lead on some of the sessions, which was ideal for me because that's exactly what we were trying to encourage. On the next slide, I've put on a bit about some of the statements from our charter that the young people felt were really stood out to them in the direction that we were going in, and that was take action and give feedback, and we are collaborators and not consultants, and that's what as a group we kind of felt we had to kind of work towards. I've also kind of listed some of the activities that we worked through and some that kind of meant most, and I felt that we got a kind of bit of a discussion around. Following these exercises, this then gave the group the confidence to participate in their first consultative project with our housing team. The group worked with the town planning team to give their opinions on a local development site. We referred back to the charter, and without prompting, one of the young people, which was a real success for us, the young people asked the team for updates and information on where their participation would lead. The young person wanted reassurance that their contribution was meaningful, and this was given to the group, and there was a plan made with that team for feedback, and that was again very much led by the young people. So from this is kind of where it got bigger. So from this and following a failed attempt to get a TEDx youth licence, we developed the idea to invite young people from all 7 of our local high schools to a huge event. It became a huge event. And this is where Speak Up Stirling was born. The group wanted to offer the chance to all young people to come along and present about topics that they were passionate about. They wanted to pass on their learning and they wanted to encourage other young people to get involved. So they themselves developed a scoring sheet on people that had referred to do presentations, and they formed a panel to whittle these down to 9, so they had to research that process. The young presenters were given no direction, and so the topics were all completely different and unique. We obviously had to fund the day, so to do that the young people looked into different funding streams and different methods. We kind of sought an opportunity to make a pitch to a corporate sponsor. The young people were very, very nervous, but pulled together an amazing presentation and were successful, and were given a really good substantial amount of money. It was amazing for us to see them achieve that, because if you'd have asked me 6 months before, I don't know if we would have accomplished that. Part of the thinking behind the funding, and the reason we kind of wanted to go down that route, was it meant that the young people, they themselves set out the wants and needs for the event, and it wasn't steered by anyone else's agenda, and that includes mine. So the young people used their newfound research skills for this. They made every decision about the day. Sorry, I've just lost my notes there, 2 seconds. They made every decision about the running of the day. They chose the venue, the invites, activities, everything about it. And we really, really held on to that and made sure that I didn't make any decisions. So much so that they chose a venue in the middle of the town centre with no parking, which was not ideal, but we made it work. They decided that young people should open and close the event, not any delegates, not our chief exec, and that's exactly what we did. And they even wanted Capital Radio DJ KTJ to host the day, and miraculously that did actually happen. So every aspect was completely young people led, and we made sure that any praise that came in after the event, which was quite a lot, was all directed towards the young people, because we really wanted people to know that it wasn't us. The event was hugely empowering for the young people, and during the planning process they decided that they wanted to relaunch as Speak Up Stirling, so we were no longer known as the Forum, which I still struggle with and call them the Forum. This encompasses everything who they are now, and it gives ownership completely back to the group. The charter and the toolkit offered the group direction and a common goal. The toolkit was really flexible. It met the young people where they were, because they all kind of came at different ages and stages, we were able to kind of follow their journey, and it allowed for inclusion, teamwork and personal reflection. So that's my very, very quick, very, very condensed summary. And we do have a kind of 1-minute video about Speak Up, which I'll happy to share with Julie and Jamie, and if you want to watch it, you're welcome to at any time. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Amy, for sharing that journey. And I was just having a laugh about the venue, and I was also thinking, well, maybe you should have got a radio DJ to host today.
I've got the name of a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so inspiring to hear about young people really leading the way they are and shaping everything that goes on now with Speak Up Stirling. So thank you so much for sharing that journey with us. I'm now going to hand over to Gillian Freeland from Clackmannanshire Council to share another perspective of how the toolkit worked in Forth Valley and West Lothian.
Perfect, thank you, Julie, and thank you very much for the invite to participate tonight and share the journey of Clackmannanshire. We've been on a similar journey as Stirling. We have had a lot of good practice across the authority, but for us, some of that good practice was a little bit uncoordinated. It was a little bit lacking in consistency, and while there was a lot of good practice going on, we wanted to make it just that little bit more meaningful. If you can move the slide on, thank you. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, the big part of Clackmannanshire Council is the focus that we are given to youth voice, and that has partly been the commitment of our senior leaders and our elected members. So for the past 3.5 years, I have been working on being the strategic lead for youth voice and UNCRC, and we've also been part of a short life working group getting the UNCRC and the charter across the corporate element of Clackmannanshire Council as well. So this isn't just coming from an education perspective, but it's actually bringing in all elements of our directorate: people, place and environment. Next slide, please. So for us, big part of the toolkit was thinking about how do we get that out to the people who actually are going to be using it fundamentally. And that was sitting down and thinking about who are the staff that are involved in Youth Voice. So not specifically just the leads, but actually any member of staff who is involved in consulting with young people in any sort of decision. And we took a lot of time to go around the primary, the secondaries, and actually sit with the staff. We took the toolkit in, we printed off the pages that we thought were relevant and made it into our own ClickManager booklet as a handout. And we also set up a Google Drive that we could put the additional links and information on as well. And it was about building up confidence, starting small, getting that consistency. And that has allowed us to bring a lot of the good practice that's happening within our establishments into our CLACS Youth Forum. So we established our CLACS Youth Forum in August 2023. And from there, we have built up a membership of young people who come together once a term to meet with our Chief Education Officer, our partners, our elected members, and they consult and share their thoughts on particular decisions or issues. We also do a lot of partnership work, and some of which I see are on the call as well, who have come into our youth forum to engage with our young people. And I think what's really interesting about our framework is that it's not the same membership in our forum. So depending on the theme of the meeting, we will bring in different young people, and that's keeping the momentum going and making sure that we're inclusive and getting that kind of impact of every young person. And that then has gone out to be the model that we put into our establishments. Next slide, please. So for us in ClickManager, we've really seen progress with the number of young people who want to get involved, the number of young people who are meaningfully bringing their contributions to the table, but also that inclusion of the young people at the outset of our decision making. And the toolkit has absolutely enabled us to do that because it's given us a focus, it's given us a structure, and it's given the partners and the staff who are working with young people as well, also the confidence to engage with them in those questions, particularly if they've got that there as a reference as well. And that's really helped us bring about positive change where young people are validated. Frequently picking up phone calls now from people who are asking, can they consult with young people? How do we get them in? Our young people regularly come into the council chambers, and we also have some of our elected members and partners going into the actual establishments as well. Granted, that's easier for us in ClickManager because we are a smaller authority, but just the fact that young people are wanting to be involved and they are asking us if they can come up to the council chambers, and that our elected members and our senior leaders are reaching out to them as well, has really helped move some of our agendas on. For example, in November, ClickManager, we were the host authority in Forth Valley for the Violence Against Women and Girls 16 Days of Activism launch, and it was our young people who led that launch, some of whom had been involved in our forum, but because we were able to use the toolkit, they prepped the questions for the youth workshops, which contained members of NHS, police, charities, White Ribbon, social work, and you know that was a big platform for them, and the feedback that we got was really positive and really heartwarming. Next slide, please. Okay. So for us, just thinking about the impact of, you know, yes, what it's done for the young people and the staff and the practitioners are involved, but also for us as an authority, for us, you know, we've really put youth voice on the agenda, and it's much more consistent. Our budget consultations, our young people are in the room with our elected members, and some of the decisions within our budget, which were difficult decisions, were changed and amended based on the feedback from our young people. So they're seeing those live actions, and it's really contributed to much more meaningful engagement, and very diverse as well. You know, we're able to represent our demographic, and we've done a lot of work. Saw somebody had put in the chat about the ASN version of the toolkit. We worked with some of our practitioners at Alva Academy who helped us make the board maker charter and make that accessible for young people who are in an ASN setting, who are maybe non-verbal, who maybe can't come to the physical places where we have the meetings, but still be involved and still feedback. And I think definitely one of the things that's helped us is that we do have now established members of staff who feel confident, who are happy using the toolkit. And we're like every other authority, we have a changeover of staff. But for us, because we've taken the time to set those structures up, it means that actually, even if we have new members of staff coming in, the groundwork and the framework that we have is able to continue. And if we think back to where we were 3 years ago now, you know, the type of things that our young people are getting involved in, they're contributing to our local outcomes improvement plan. They're in the budget meetings. They've been invited by Scottish Water and our Chief Executive, Nicky Bridle, to contribute to what are going to be some of our plans to meet net zero. They're also getting part in a number of our other campaigns with Columba 1400, and they're also been invited to meet the senior leaders as part of the Hunter Foundation to present their ideas on behalf of Clackmannshire Council. And again, that is just talking about, you know, the quote that you had right at the beginning, Julie, about youth-led solutions. So we are absolutely delighted about the progress that we've made. We've got priorities, we're continuing to move that forward, but actually the toolkit has really helped us to push our agenda on.
Thank you so much, Gillian. It's so wonderful reflecting back on that journey, from the point of time when we were looking at the Forth Valley Charter with the young people and using the board maker symbols, and from then, you know, to where it's at now. It's so wonderful to hear that journey, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm going to move on just to highlight a couple of bits of information from Harrismuir Primary School. So unfortunately, Charis and Hilary couldn't be with us today. Hilary has very kindly recorded a 10-minute video talking through her approach with a Primary 5 class. So we'll pop the YouTube link to that in the chat, and we'll share it afterwards as well, if you would like to find out a bit more about the Youth Voice project in Primary 5 that Charis and Hilary facilitated. Just wanted to highlight a couple of bits of learning and give a wee bit of flavour of the work at Harrismuir. So you'll see on the screen here some of the children's work. The group explored what the best school would look like and what learning would look like in that school. So that was the research that they were working on, and they started with those kind of original questions. There were lots of themes that came out of those questions, including opportunities for more outdoor learning and play, and they wanted to do more about making learning fun and enjoyable, and considered how digital technology supports their learning, and also they wanted to learn more about how learning is shared with their families. So there was so much to think about that came out of that group at Harrismuir. So they're now working on further developing this approach to fully embed those opportunities, to use the toolkit to shape learning and teaching, as well as shaping the experiences that children and young people have out with the classroom as well. So they're also looking at utilising partnerships and funding opportunities to encourage outdoor learning and promoting teacher confidence. So reflecting back there what you were saying, Gillian, around increasing teacher confidence as well. So there is that 10-minute video in the chat. I would definitely recommend it over a cuppa to hear Hilary talking about the approach and how it went down in Primary 5 last year. So moving on to the final bit of our session today, we just wanted to reiterate the huge difference that this toolkit can make wherever you are in your Youth Voice journey, whether you're just starting out or whether you have Youth Voice structures really embedded across your setting. This toolkit provides a consistent approach. So with practitioners across different settings using a similar high quality approach, it improves the overall quality of the Youth Voice activities and the consultation, but it's also tailorable, and hopefully you'll have seen that today through the presentations and through the original demonstration of the toolkit. It's very adaptable, and we're very open to practitioners sharing with us how they adapt it. So if something works really well in your setting, please let us know, because we're keen to keep developing this as we go. So further to this, using the toolkit guarantees greater representation. Returning to that very quote at the start of the session, around 5% of children and young people feeling heard. Having more voices being heard gives a more accurate collective view of what children and young people think. So having a peer-led research process means that there's increased engagement in consultations, there's better quality and diversity in those results, and children and young people understand the themes that they're being consulted on. So this supports that overall genuine and non-tokenistic approach to Youth Voice, and it presents opportunities for children and young people to consult each other on things that really matter to them. It also gives leaders and practitioners a chance to pose questions to children and young people on big issues. So lots to think about, and I'll now hand over to Jamie for the next steps.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Gillian. That was excellent. And again, it's really empowering to hear the journeys that you've all been on, especially since this all came from the work that was done in Stirling and then the work in Forth Valley and West Lothian. And now we're here today launching it as a national model. I just want to highlight as we come to the end of our input today that we've got some professional learning sessions for the toolkit that will take place on the dates here, and they're open to any practitioners and all practitioners who want to start using it. Again, you don't need to attend these. If you are quite comfortable using the toolkit and the guidance that's there, as it's already been explained, it's quite detailed in how you implement it. But again, if you want that little bit extra professional learning for specific scenarios, specific ways of using it, then ultimately would recommend coming along. But please feel free to share these with your colleagues, clusters, partners and networks. The professional learning sessions will be offered initially to support practitioners and how to use the toolkit. And then as we go on and as the toolkit's rolled out over the next sort of year, we'll look to offer other professional learning that can respond to needs. Just to highlight, and really importantly, this is our ask from ourselves to you, that this toolkit makes such a difference, as you've heard, and it's got such variability and such consistency to it, all matched together. But what we're looking to do is really capture how it's been utilised and the kind of impact it's making. So within the resources, within the toolkit's kind of implementation guidance is our sort of, again, impact form. So if you start to use the toolkit, please complete this so we know where you are and we know how to get in touch. And again, hear for your story, because we want to capture those stories and share them across the country. And finally, just for those that are maybe not at that stage yet, that are maybe not 100% sure about implementing it, but want to be keeping in touch, we've got a specific form here that we'll put in the chat that allows anybody that wants to kind of receive updates from ourselves and our sort of Youth Voice mailing list. If you complete that form, just to let us know your email, your details again, we can keep you updated and you can share this with others. So I'm just going to culminate there. Again, this toolkit has been developed based on research, it's been developed based on really good practice, and now it's at this model where it can be used nationally. It's something that offers a consistent approach, empowers children and young people to hear from their peers and not just being consulted themselves, but also it gives practitioners confidence in what they're doing, and also if they are the ones facilitating Youth Voice, how to do it really effectively.